everybody, and a very warm welcome to you. You're listening to The Music Business Buddy with me, Johnny Amos, podcasting out of Birmingham in England. I'm the author of the book, The Music Business for Music Creators, available in hardback, paperback and ebook format. I'm a music creator with a variety of credits. I'm a consultant, an artist manager and a senior lecturer in both music business and music creation. Wherever you are and whatever you do, consider yourself welcome to this podcast and to a part of the community. I'm here to try and educate and inspire music creators from all over the world in their quest to achieving their goals by gaining a greater understanding of the business of music. In this week's episode, we're going to be looking at the live sector, so understanding the mechanics and the basic business principles of the live sector. So that includes things like grassroots growth, tour managers, festivals, promoters, booking agents. What do they all do? So let's get rolling. Okay, one of the most fascinating things about this subject is this. We're in a time now in the mid-2020s, and this has perhaps been true for about 10 years now, right? Whereby you can have a really, really good live following, a good fanatical following with a loyal fan base, and yet you can really struggle when it comes to streaming numbers. Also, the polar opposite is true, whereby you can have millions of streams and really not have much of a live following. And so where the kind of growth rates of, hard data sits and live ticket sales and streaming, it's really only when those two actually triangulate and connect and move forward that an artist really starts to catch on a wider level. So that's an interesting thought to begin with, because today, there are acts that have millions of streams on Spotify and would struggle to sell 200 tickets in their hometown. It's hard to believe, but it happens. But those acts also walk those same streets as other acts that could sell easily a 200 capacity venue quite simply, quite quickly within a couple of days, and yet don't have the streams to use as a leverage to attract a sort of successful booking agent or even a manager sometimes. So, growing a fan base on the live circuit has always been a key driver of growth for any artist that isn't, a straight up pop act or perhaps just a studio only concept. Live music is one of the things that has stood the test of time throughout all of the changes in the industry, in recent decades. So the economics have switched. We know this, right? The basic economic factor has switched between artists that used to tour to sell a record, and now today acts use streaming as a marketing tool to attract a live following. However, the art that's actually shared on stage hasn't really changed. So, live music, it's undeniably special. We love it. Its songs have a whole new meaning. Artists create a connection with their audiences in a way that can only really be done on a live level sometimes. So, it's difficult to articulate just how special it is, but there is also something perhaps even quite tribal, right, about standing in a large crowd of people all enjoying an atmosphere and sharing that energy that is created by a live performance. So if you were to ask any emerging artist what they want out of their careers, perhaps as long as their ideals are with performing live, and not everybody's are, but if they are, then perhaps scaling up their live music presence would probably be mentioned in some capacity in the first half of their answer. That's what I find anyway. So, for some creators, it is the thing that defines their musical identity, what they do on stage and how they're perceived. So, let's unpack it a little bit. Let's have a look at some of the roles in the sector. All right, let's start with promoters. So promoters at all levels are, a cornerstone of the live sector, with several purposes and roles and duties that they carry out. So promoters can either be individuals or they can be companies, and their core aim is to effectively promote live music and artists. So they range from those who book artists to play at small grassroots venues to those who book huge festivals. So often the venue itself can also be a promoter. Promoters generally secure bookings for venues that can range from, clubs and pubs and halls, arenas, even festivals. They enter into contracts with venues or with event organisers, which outline the terms of the agreement reached between those parties, right? So the promoter then books the artist to play, promotes the event, in theory anyway, through posters, banners, social media, ad campaigns, whatever it might be, and engages also ideally with the press to secure further coverage of that event. So duties will also vary on, I guess depending on the size of the artist and also the size of the venue, but promoters are responsible for the audience experience to some extent, right? So that also includes things like security and logistics and ticket sales. Promoters also negotiate on the fees for artists in advance. So they generally have a wide network of music professionals, especially booking agents, which we'll come on to afterwards, venues, managers, event organisations, and of course, artists themselves that book directly with promoters. So promoters at a more sort of grassroots level, who tend to work in kind of regional areas, towns, cities, etc., are often quite useful to talent scouts and to A&R personnel, because they're looking to find emerging talent, right? So promoters on a national and a kind of international scale tend to be more proactive in the promotion of live events, where the emphasis is on gaining visibility for the artist's tour dates. But on a more kind of grassroots level, promoters can also be a huge filter for talent. Festivals. So in addition to providing support slots, obviously, for sort of your headline acts, music festivals also play a pretty crucial role in bringing new artists to a wider audience. In fact, that's one of the very hallmarks of many festivals, is to introduce new talent to new audiences and be associated with that and champion a new artist. Because if you think about it, since the turn of, let's say, the century, festivals have just grown exponentially, right? There's more festivals now than there's ever been before, and so with that competition comes the need to do something different, and championing local and newly emerging talent on a national, local, international level is a really, really big part of that. Also, many major festivals around the world cater for families and a much more kind of broad age mix, in addition to younger generations of listeners, right? So these are the things that have changed in the last sort of 25 years or so, I suppose. Festivals can range, of course, from, small town fusion festivals combining food and culture and local music, all the way up to, mega festivals like Glastonbury in the UK, Coachella in the USA, for example. Now, festivals, they're fun, aren't they? Right? They happen generally in the warmer months, and they associate themselves with just fun, good times, memories, etc. But they are just a brilliant way of new emerging artists to establish themselves and to instantly extend that fan base, perhaps even more powerfully than streaming can, right? Because you're offering an experience to people. So it's very important that recording artists do the research, right, on festivals and just to kind of identify which would be the ones that are most suited to them, right? There's nothing worse than kind of, going, oh, great, yeah, we got this on this festival over here, bang, we go. And then you go, oh, no, this is totally wrong, isn't it? We had a great day, but it's just not a good fit. And that's all down to research, right? And research also extends itself to understanding the application process, the deadlines, that kind of thing. Many booking agents and managers expect bands and artists to scale themselves up and to build their stage show through appearances at local and regional festivals. But there are also many emerging artists who get a major break, right, at major festivals, through networking and stuff. So sponsors can also be influential in suggesting acts for festival slots, as can contemporary music universities and regional radio and various other pipeline access points into the festival circuit. It's a festival promoter's job to be aware, right, of emerging artists who are building their reputations, as many large festivals, want to be associated with breaking talent. What about tour managers, right? I mean, I must be honest with you guys. I've seen so many different types of tour managers over the years that can really, really vary from kind of just on the ground, quite militant, enforcers of timekeeping on a kind of small tour, right up to like, those kind of crazy busy tour managers that are great at their spreadsheets and carry around two different phones, and it's just. But one thing they always are pretty organised, because a tour manager plays a pretty crucial on the ground role in the success of a tour, and a tour manager is often defined by their ability, right, to juggle logistics and time and emergencies and crisis response, people management, right, while also simultaneously supporting the audience experience and handling travel arrangements for artists and crew and budgeting and health and safety, artist support, all sorts of different unexpected tasks. Crikey, I'm putting people off becoming tour managers here, aren't I? No, do that role if that's something you want to do. It's a very, very rewarding role. Loads of brilliant people do it. The tour manager's role is also an around the clock responsibility, right, which in many cases starts several months in advance of a tour, through efficient planning. And also, when you really look at the kind of, has a tour been successful, a lot of it often, perhaps unfairly, but sits on a tour manager a lot of the time. They have to be the one that kind of balances the books and reports back and says, has this worked? Has it not? This is what's been spent. This is what's been made. Here we're at. It's a big job, right? So, a tour manager is somebody who, can be relied upon, right? Who's that kind of central point of safety, of good, kind of calm, measured, calculated approaches to how you get through something. Booking agents. Okay, so often referred to as, sometimes just agents or music agents or talent agents. Booking agents are music industry professionals or companies, right, that secure live bookings for artists by working in partnership with promoters, venues, event organisers, festivals, etc. to secure gigs. Now, often, they work quite closely with artist management and also with artists. Booking agents are responsible for booking tours, but also, one-off live performances as well. Booking agents, they tend to do quite well in the areas of contract and fee negotiations, and they take a commission, right, on the artist's fee in exchange for their time, their services, their expertise. Booking agents also tend to sort of excel at the logistical side of things. So your itineraries, your travel arrangements, backline and technical arrangements, accommodation, that kind of thing. Booking agents also support the marketing of live performance events alongside the promoter and the artist team, although that can vary on scale and territory. But many booking agents also help an artist and their team to make informed decisions about kind of strategy and market trends in relation to actually how to upscale, an artist from a certain level up to a next level, maybe going from one circuit up to another, and what that path might look like. So I've often found over the years the booking agents work pretty closely with managers, especially when it comes to scheduling, right? Because you get a schedule wrong and you have to unpick everything and start again. So working quite closely with managers is very important. By the way, if I just pause for a minute, as we're about sort of 13 minutes in or so, can you see the crossover between three things so far, right? So look at the crossover point between promoters, between festivals, between booking agents and tour managers, by the way, right? So there are certain times where I've talked about those four different things so far, where I've started to kind of repeat myself a little bit between some of the overlap on the tasking between those things. That's for two reasons, everybody, right? Number one, because there is overlap. Certain booking agents will do this, where a tour manager might be more responsible for that. There are variables to it, right? Depending upon scale and culture and different music genres and that kind of stuff. There shouldn't be, but there is. It's just life. And the other aspect is this, right? Sometimes you get people that just are so reliable at what they do that they become a go-to person. A lot of tour managers are like that. That's why, a lot of booking agents have, certain favoured tour managers, because they just know they can kind of go, oh, it's them, great, we can rely on them, in the same way that a band can, right? Let's imagine doing this tour without that tour manager. Oh, it'd be so difficult. They're brilliant. We don't have to deal with the promoters. They do it. the crossover between all these things, that idea of kind of scaling up, building a network, building a team. A lot of people use that word these days, don't they? But what it really means is putting trust in other people around you. But if you do that too much, you lose the understanding of what those roles are. So it's very important. That's why I'm doing this episode, right? So you can understand the mechanics behind how all this stuff overlaps. Because it could be that you look at a certain thing and you go, well, I thought booking agents do that. Well, I thought promoters did that. But actually, they both kind of do that a little bit, right? When it comes to promotion, for example, logistics can cross over between a tour manager and a booking agent. So, there are those little overlap areas which I think can kind of lead to a little bit of needless confusion sometimes as to where the book lands with the responsibility of a different type of professional. But hopefully that clears it up a little bit. Okay, let's move into a different segment now. Here we go. Grassroots growth. Okay, this is at the absolute heart of everything in the live sector. Many music creators are of course keen to win the fans of the world's major cities, but it is healthy to question whether this is always the right approach, right? So when it comes to building a following on the live circuit, smaller towns may be preferable to big cities, no matter how appealing the tour poster, right, might actually look when all those big cities are listed on there. I know that looks cool, right? But it's not always the best way to scale things up, right? So some venues, for example, here in the UK, have a very kind of ready-made community and a fan base that already exists that support a lot of artists that go to those venues. Now, I don't see those kind of places in cities, but I do see them in towns and in villages. So music creators would be well advised to think how a booking agent actually thinks, and that is with strategy and with purpose. Now, I say that because a keen eye for growth is perhaps more important, right, than personal preferences or musical snobbery. Let's take, for example, this, right? Let's take a local metal band, right, that despises tribute acts, right? Now, they would actually be far better placed supporting a Metallica tribute act, right, for several shows rather than playing to, 15 people at their own local gig, right? You see what I mean, right, about musical snobbery. So overlooking one's values, let's say, is not really a compromise of integrity if it works to the best interests of that metal band, right? Growth is key because despondency can very, very, very quickly kick in if an act is continually playing the same places to the same people. Things can very, very, very quickly get stale on a grassroots level if that happens. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the music or the performance, but rather a reflection of the strategy. That same metal band could instead be researching tastemakers in their subgenre by identifying YouTubers and bloggers and journalists who are keen to find that next big metal act. And these, they don't need to be people in their own hometown or even in their own home country, right? The traction that they build from that can then be used as press leverage to gain local and regional tour support slots, especially if they can prove that they have a good local following that that a touring band can tap into, right? So that's generally how it starts. So, that local support can be driven not only by their fantastic live show, but also through their continued improvement in the studio. And just that general approach to good PR that they build for themselves by thinking more innovatively about their social media output, right? So before long, that band are doing interviews about their humble beginnings and the good old days and reminiscing about the places that no longer exist instead of staying in those places and rotting inside them. You see the difference, everybody, between those two things. It's avoidable, and it's avoidable with one word, and that is strategy. Okay, now let's talk about pitching, because it's fairly straightforward to kind of get off the ground on a grassroots level by working with local promoters. So I'm talking about the kind of promoters that would say, you get X amount back if you get 25 people through the door, etc., etc. That's where it starts, right? And then it has to grow from there, doesn't it? So it has to be, right, let's go and do gig swaps. Let's go to other towns and cities and different places. And again, this is where the research comes in, right? Kind of like, where can we play? Where can we go and play? There's a lot of that is down to research. And sometimes that means looking outside of social media and just looking a little deeper, going onto that second, third page of Google and finding those venues that absolutely cater for what you do, right? So that's one side of it. But beyond promoters, there is, of course, you'd have a tour manager. It's kind of easier to get a tour manager because they're a paid role, right? Finding good ones can be hard, right? But, it's kind of something that you can get once you've got the money to do it. But perhaps one of the key people to pitch to there, right, is actually a booking agent, because a booking agent, as I mentioned earlier, they're the ones that really kind of help you to kind of strategically step up a few levels. Now, here's the thing that booking agents ask artists, and it's exactly the same thing that everyone asks artists is, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? What genre are you in? Right? All the answers that should kind of form a bio, really, right? Now, that question, when they say things like, what style are you in, or who would you support, or what playlist should you go on, what they're trying to do is they're actually trying to figure out how to sell you, because if they don't know how to sell you, they're probably not going to want to work with you. If they get an idea of where you sit in the landscape of the live circuit, what kind of level you could go in at, where you can start on a grassroots level, and then it gives them an idea of how to actually scale you up, right? But they're kind of going to need to have a pretty good understanding of, where you want to go, where you see yourself going, and who you could share a stage with, right? I think it's a pretty impossible task for them if they don't know the answers to those things. And if they don't know the answers to those things, they'll be asking you. And if you don't, they're not going to work with you. So it goes back to that same age-old question set that comes from everybody, including record companies and managers and PR, which is, what are you? Where do you sit? What style are you in? Which all reverses itself back to, how do I sell you? And if you can tell someone how to sell you, they're more likely to want to sell you. So there is nothing to stop anyone from reaching out to booking agents. And loads of people, by the way, will tell you that that's not the right way to do it. And I can tell you that there are plenty of people that I know that have done that and it's worked. So yes, in an ideal world, a booking agent would become aware of you because you've spread your wings musically and you've started to work with different promoters and you've got a few streams, and maybe a booking agent hears about you and they get in touch with you. Bam. Brilliant. But what about if that doesn't happen? What about actually if maybe, just maybe, you need to be a bit more proactive? So here's where you go. You start by researching who the most suitable ones are. It's fairly easy to do. You just have to think outside the box and Google. Just start by Googling booking agents, followed by your country, followed by your genre. It will begin to funnel results that can become your starting point as to where you pivot from in order to find the right people. You find those right people, you go onto their website, you look at their submission policy, if they have one, and if they don't, you just hit the contact button and then you email them. And this is what you email them. You tell them who you are, where you're from, what you do, and what your plans are. And you leave your music with them, because they're either going to come back or they're not. But this is the law of averages, right? This is a numbers game. So the more you do that, the more it will yield results. Most of them probably won't get back to you, but some of them might. And if they do, then you've made something happen instead of waiting it for come to you, right? So that's a great place to get started with booking agents. And actually it works more effectively if you don't just kind of blast out an email to loads of them. It actually works better if you put that person's name in there and you maybe even mention some of the artists that they work with, right? And just sort of, go, hey, we see that you do this. We're in the same wheelhouse. We do this over here. This is where we're trying to get to. Would you like to set up a chat? That's a great way of doing things. It's very business-like, right? So that's a good idea to go forward with. Okay, so there's a few sort of general musings about the mechanics of the live sector on a kind of operational level as to kind of where things are at, what roles actually sit within this, what those people do and how to work with them, and most importantly, how to scale up with them so that you go from playing to hardly anybody in a pub, in a cafe, to then scaling it up to that next level. Guys, I'm going to level with you. I used to be in a rock group 20 years or so ago, right? It sounds like a long time ago. It feels like nothing to me. But I was in a group that played to two people in a pub, right? And then scaled it up to doing sellout tours within around about 18 months. It was an utterly remarkable thing to witness, that level of growth moving that quickly without any kind of label support, right? And it was done through hard graft of just playing and playing and playing and playing. And guys, when I tell you that, those cities on that tour date, yes, they look good, but I can tell you the growth came from playing in towns. The growth came from working pocket towns and going and playing in the likes of Harlow and Wigan and all these kind of smaller kind of towns that may not look like they're on the map, but my God, they are, because when you go and talk to those three girls at the back of the room that came to see you, they will be there again next time, and they'll be there with their friends. And a lot of people don't talk about that side of it, but it could be that actually that's a far stronger emotional touch point than a passive stream. There are loads of things that have changed in this business over the last few decades, and that is one thing that hasn't changed at all. So that's a very important aspect to think of. And when I talk about these things, it comes from a place of passion because it comes from the place of experience. I can tell you that it is entirely possible to build a good following by working hard at it. Because eventually what starts to happen is that you'll notice the kind of people that are coming to those gigs, and you'll look at them and you'll be able to then figure out the kind of people that they are. What do they look like? What clothes do they wear? So then when you then talk to that branding specialist, that marketeer, that PR, and they say, who are your fans? And you can literally explain them. It is then at that point that you can start to target those similar kind of audiences online and scale up even further. So if you go right back to the first triangulation point on this podcast where I talked about that discordance between streaming and live, when we connect those two things, we get proper growth, right? And that is what I'm talking about, right? Is the alignment between those two things, because they can feel like two worlds that almost kind of sit independently from each other. And for many they are, but I can tell you, they can, they do, and they should coexist. And when they do, that's when you're talking about investment from other parties, because they can see that there's a major market behind what you do because you've already started to own a piece of it. Anyway, there's a few thoughts for you about the live sector and also its relationship to the streaming ecosystem and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to leave those thoughts with you to let them marinate in your mind. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime you like. Have a wonderful day, and may the force be with you.
The music